The other day, I did something that I hadn't really done in a serious manner for a pretty good long while. I went over to the tech closet and I grabbed my Surface Duo 2. I got everything updated, I got all my app updates run and all that good stuff. And I decided to sit down and really try to use the thing. I went as far as actually signing in with the web app for messages for web so that I could see, my text messages, leave my primary phone in my pocket, and just kind of use this thing as though it was my primary phone. Now, I actually would have went a step further and actually really put my SIM in this thing for a couple of days just to test things out, see where things were, but something's gone horribly wrong with my battery life. With no SIM, just Wi-Fi, it's passable but bad. With a SIM in here, I don't know what is going on, but like you could literally sit there and watch the battery go dead. You just watch that number getting lower. So I decided SIM's going to stay in the Pixel 9 Pro Fold, and we'll just kind of work around that a little bit. But as I was doing that, several things struck me about that experience, and I want to talk to you guys about that today in this video. So first, let me just point out some of the, maybe you would call them rough edges that are perhaps getting a little bit rougher. Surface Duo 2 never was known for having a particularly smooth, efficient, fast version of Android. It was fine in particular at the time, those many years ago, but those deficiencies are really beginning to look like deficiencies these days. Just opening applications, things are just a beat slower than you expect them to be, right? I mean, look, things are still cool, opening a link here, boom, opens it up over here, but that is just slower than it really has any reason to be at this point. In fact, that was so slow that I think something must have gone wrong. Okay, that was a little bit faster. Let's delete that one. Let's close that. Let's go into this one. We'll try the same thing. Okay, that was, a little bit weird, but that kind of thing happens sometimes. Things just kind of grind to a halt, and it's unclear why it's happening. In general, animations just don't always look as smooth as you want them to be. Sometimes they look great, but sometimes they don't look great. Sometimes they look a little bit weird, a little bit laggy, a little bit choppy. You're going to notice these things in particular if you're coming from a newer, more modern foldable device with a top-end processor, more RAM. That stuff is beginning to matter a lot more. Something else that you might notice is that, when you're using this thing as a phone in phone mode, that is a very, very wide phone. I'm going to slide my Pixel 9 Pro Fold in here so you can kind of get a general idea of what I'm talking about here. Back the camera out just a little bit. This is, a much easier to sort of hold on to, reach across one-hand type with. If you're over here and you're trying to do some one-handed typing, good luck. Can you reach the letter Q way over there? I certainly can't. I guess I could go to a floating keyboard and just bring it over here. There's other workarounds for something like that, but you're going to need a workaround. This is a very wide phone when in phone mode, and it's just not conducive to that one-handed use. Another thing is that the camera was, passable at the time. It's pretty darn bad now. This is the Duo. This is my Pixel 9 Pro Fold, and you can see probably even in this view how much more noise and grain there is in the Duo's photo versus in the Pixel's photo. Definitely looks like more detail in the Pixel's photo as well. And if you get into lower light situations that are more challenging, this was not a particularly challenging shot, that gap is only going to get bigger. But there are some things that stood out in a really positive way, things that just made me remember immediately what I loved about this device. In virtually an instant, I found myself right back where I was, sort of holding this device like this in this book mode, and maybe in one hand I was over here scrolling through the Discord server or something like that and leaving this screen just vacant. Why would I do that? Why wouldn't I just put it in phone mode? Because something would happen and I would think to myself, I need to use another application. Like this morning, I was actually waiting on someone to arrive at the house. So maybe at a random moment, I would just click on the Wyze icon and check my front door camera, and nothing's happened over here. I'm completely unobstructed here. That's just opened up on another screen. And then, if I don't care about that anymore, I can go home and go back to what I was doing over here. It just felt so natural to me again, like I'm using a dual monitor computer setup. And there were also times when I was in phone mode like that, and I'm doing the same sorts of things. I'm just using it as a normal phone. Notice how touch is not registering there for a moment. Surface Duo. And something would happen, and I could just quickly flap this thing around, hit that extra application, do what I need to do, and then close it when I'm done. Surface Duo, doing Surface Duo things again. Okay. Let's get back to where we were. Generally speaking, that worked okay. It's just a different way of approaching multitasking that still resonates with me. Your mileage may vary, but for me, just having that second screen there is just more intuitive. How do I launch the second application? Well, I just launch a second application. I'll launch Threads, and then if I want to launch something else, I just launch something else. If it's on a different home screen, I just scroll to it. If it's in the app drawer, I just look for it. And if I need to launch it, I just launch it. It's really, really simple, and it's just there all the time. You can do the same exact sorts of things over here, but you're going to launch Threads, and it's going to open it up in full screen. And if I want to launch Feedly, I have to grab my taskbar, and I got to remember where Feedly was. Then I can drag it up there, and then we are in a very similar situation. But it's just, like I said, and again, your mileage may vary, it just feels simpler and more intuitive over here. Now, from this perspective, this is my Pixel 9 Pro Fold, and I could grab my Z Fold 6, I could grab my OnePlus Open, and things would be very, very different. But just to kind of lean into this being my daily driver, this used to be my daily driver, how things are kind of similar, this can only do 2 apps side by side, this can only do 2 apps side by side. It's the exact same way. Likewise, if I'm over here, and no matter if I've touched this app last or not, if I swipe back on the right side, it goes back on this application. Same thing over here. Let's touch this app. So this app was the last one used. Swipe back over here. I go back over here. Now that to me just makes intuitive sense, and they both do that really well. They both also have the ability to do floating windows, like something YouTube can do. And to be clear, when I say floating windows, what I meant to say was picture-in-picture, YouTube, go home. Hey, there's my floating window, and I can go back to Threads, and now I've got 1 app, 2 app, and then a floating picture-in-picture window, and that is exactly as it is on the Pixel. Of course, one big difference is I can go home on individual apps over here. I can go home on this screen only. If I go home here, I go home everywhere. One other big difference that I actually prefer on Duo is that if I begin to type on this device, even though I'm only typing on the right screen, I get a keyboard that covers up the entire bottom half, obscuring part of this screen. Now, I could jump in here, and I could probably open up a floating window, and I could kind of approximate what we're talking about. But over here, opening the keyboard to type on one app only opens it over top of that app, leaving this app completely unobscured. I think that that's really, really smart. Here's kind of an interesting thing as well. This app, YouTube Music, used to actually act differently on the Pixel 9 Pro Fold. It used to be that no matter how it was oriented, when the device was open, you would get this dual panel layout. They have since sort of taken that away from us for whatever reason. You have to rotate it. Over here on Surface Duo, if we span this app, bring it to the middle so that it goes across both applications, you get that dual panel layout. And guys, it actually works brilliantly well over here. It's like it was made for Surface Duo. I assure you, it was not made with Duo in mind at all, but it works great. So there are instances where Google Apps kind of work great on this thing, sometimes even working better than they do on the Pixel. Let's kind of pivot back to the keyboard for just a second, because I actually think that there are some really cool things here. So there are a lot of things being added to our keyboards these days to improve our experience. Of course, we have the ability to click on a microphone and talk and say what we need to say, and it's going to type all of that stuff in for us. But now on devices like the Pixel, we have these neat little proofreading programs that will jump in here, and it's going to add that comma, it's going to add that period at the end, and it's going to format your text correctly. you will say, hey, I don't have this on my non-Pixel device, but let's actually switch to the Microsoft SwiftKey keyboard, and there's this little pen icon, the editor, and it's going to do the same thing. It's a little bit slower, but it's going to do the exact same thing. So we have that feature here. Of course, Pixels have gotten the new Gemini Assistant, which pops up there at the bottom of the screen, and I've actually really come to enjoy Gemini on Surface Duo. We can do a corner swipe, and guess what? There is Gemini as well, and it's going to have the exact same functionality. Now, this is kind of a weird one, because Microsoft does have Copilot, and they were actually sort of like adding a bunch of Copilot stuff to Microsoft Launcher in the beta builds. And that stuff seems to be gone now. There was a Copilot button up here in the corner, and they've removed it. Of course, with Pixel devices, we also have the lovely, amazing Magic Editor that will allow us to jump in here and remove sort of eyesore things from our photos and do other things. We can also use Reimagine and tell it what we want to be there. We can move this object around if we want to do that, which I'm not actually going to do that. I'm just going to erase it. But did you know that if you do have a Google One subscription, you have the ability to do the exact same thing on your Surface Duo? You can get rid of that trash can just the same. It's going to be a little bit slower, as you can see, and I definitely did misclick there. Let's try clicking on the trash can again. There we go. We got the trash can. A little bit of lag there. We'll circle that top bit, and let's go ahead and erase it on Duo. As we're doing that, we'll zoom in, and you can see that it has done an amazing job on the Pixel of getting rid of that. And here on Duo, guess what? It's fine. It can do the exact same thing because the app runs on this device. Now, like I said, you don't have Reimagine, you don't have all of the features, so you can't type in, instead of a trash can, what I want there to be there is a small dinosaur, and get whatever this absolute nightmare thing was. There we go. There's a small dinosaur that actually makes sense. You can't do that on Duo with Google Photos, but you can do a lot of other stuff that's pretty cool. I'm not trying to tell you that there is in existence a reality where I would put my sim back in Surface Duo 2 in this instance, and daily drive it without having significant issues, without wondering why I'm doing what I'm doing, put my sim back in my Pixel, my Z Fold. What I am telling you is that it's kind of shocking that even with the rough edges getting rougher, Duo still manages to do a shocking amount right. It has kept up in quite a few surprising ways. It kind of reminds me of a certain phenomena in video games where certain games back in the day that tried to be hyper realistic, as the technology improved, when you look back at them, they don't hold up. They do not look good. In fact, they look terrible. But games from the same era that went another route, that went for an art style, maybe cell shading or something like that, Wind Waker, Okami, those games still look pretty darn good all these years later. Duo's kind of like that. It doesn't look good because it's technologically advanced. It looks good because the concept that they went with has stood the test of time for those of us for whom it made sense. More than anything, it just makes me really wish Microsoft had produced a Surface Duo 3, and no, not the single folding OLED Duo 3 that they were working on, the one that they canceled before that, which was a lot like Duo 2, a dual screen device with improved specs and continued work on the software. They were on to something with this form factor and with this device, and you cannot convince me otherwise. The fact that this thing started off so rough and yet in 2025 is still holding on as well as it is. There are still quite a few people, and I have spoken to them, using these devices every single day. It's astonishing. What it says is that for the people for whom this clicked, that this just made sense, it still makes sense, and there is still no true alternative for it on the market, and that makes me sad. All that being said, guys, Surface Duo users, sound off in the comments down below. What are you doing with your Duo these days? How did you enjoy this sort of look back at Duo in 2025? For non-Surface Duo users, I'm surprised that you're still here. You probably think that I'm absolutely out of my mind. At any rate, though, guys, subscribe for more content like this. I'll see you on the next one. And until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.